Gloves off with David Singer. I have a very, 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 very special guest today, Alice Bravo, the Director of Transportation and Public Works in the Miami-Dade County. And I want to thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, anytime. And so we're going to be asking her some questions about transit in Dade County. First, we want to say something to her directly, and this requires no feedback, but I'm personally disheartened with the fact that you're leaving, and I appreciate your service. And it's bad that certain politicians are beholden to dark money and unions instead of what's best for the overall residents of Dade County. I have a lot of respect for unions, but when they publicly come out and demand that somebody be terminated, I think it crosses the line. So I just want to let you know that right up front. I know you've worked here for 5 years and you've given your life to Dade County, and I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. And I want to say I've been at the county 5.5 years. It's been an amazing experience. There are all kinds of initiatives we've advanced and accomplished. And it's been a great experience. And I have to say that in our Department of Transportation and Public Works, we have some of the finest, most professional employees. Everybody in our transit system is dedicated, from the bus operators to the people that clean the buses, to the people that schedule the buses, to the mechanics on the trains. Everybody puts their heart and soul every day into that service, because we know the community depends on it. Thousands and thousands of people without transit wouldn't be able to get to work, wouldn't be able to go to school, etc. So it's a true service from the heart. And so that, I think, has been my greatest pleasure, meeting so many employees. We hand out monthly service awards, 30, 35 years, and people that really put their life into this. I've been in public service now 17 years. I used to be in the private sector, and then I went to the Florida Department of Transportation. I went to the city of Miami. Now I've been at the county, and recently I received a very good offer to return back to the private sector, and I just couldn't say no. So I'm very glad to be working with Mayor Levine Cava. She asked me to transition for a few months, so I'm helping keep things in order, accomplish a lot of things before I go, and certainly I'll be around to help the administration in any way I can.
Yeah, I hope, but I doubt it will happen that they find somebody with your tenacity and your educational background and your intellect to fill your position.
Well, I think there are a lot of great people out there, a lot of great transportation professionals, and certainly I believe the mayor is going to do her best to bring in somebody amazing for this job.
We appreciate that. So let's start with a couple questions. I'm going to be a little bit, by the way, there'll be people emailing and us probably with some questions. We'll try to get to as many questions as humanly possible. And Tommy, if you monitor it and also let me know who's logged in so I can say hello. So tell us the last 5.5 years. And I've done a little bit of research. Matter of fact, I actually know that you went to University of Miami and you went to FIU. I've done some research.
I'm balanced.
And you're balanced, right? You got a master's degree at FIU and UM. You have your license in engineering.
Yes.
Yeah. See, I'm right on top of things, right? Tell us about since you've been there, the replacing of the Metro Rail cars and the buses with natural gas and for zero emissions. Tell us how that's occurred over the last 5 years.
I have to say that our county policymakers, the county commission, et cetera, has made it such a priority to improve our public transit system. So we have close to 800 buses. During peak hour, we run about 550. When we finish this last wave of acquisition that we're doing, 3/4 of our bus fleet will be brand new. And the bulk of those new.
And what time period is that? What time period is that?
We've done that over the last maybe 2 years,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe another 6 to 8 months to go. And so the bulk of the replacement has been done with CNG buses, compressed natural gas. So they're environmentally friendly, fewer emissions, et cetera. And we've also acquired electric buses. So we're expecting the first 33 electric buses to start rolling in around May. That's when we get our first pilot bus. So when 5.5 years ago, we had some buses that were like 18, 19 years old.
I saw them.
They were 18, 19 years old. They all had a different paint scheme, and again, our very resourceful staff, we found that it was less costly to wrap buses with like a cling instead of painting them. So very quickly we focused that we wanted to send the message that our fleet and all our services were clean, safe, and reliable. So we wrapped the buses, we gave them that uniform exterior appearance, and then we focused on detailed deep cleaning. And of course, now with COVID-19, cleaning has taken on a whole new meaning. We disinfect the vehicles several times a day, in the field, back when they come into the garages, because obviously safety is our top priority. And with regard to the Metrorail went into service in 1984.
Yeah, it was called the White Elephant. It was during Reagan's administration. And I've always lived in Miami, so I actually remember the Metrorail being built. So the buses, the cars were the same cars.
So
right?
They were the original cars from 1984, and 5.5 years ago, we were down to a small number of cars that really still worked. The cars were so old that parts really weren't available for them anymore. So we were getting parts from cities that were retiring their trains. There were some parts we were trying to manufacture locally, and we had cannibalized parts from older trains that weren't in service anymore. And now we have our brand new Metrorail fleet. And what's important about having new buses and new trains, that means we have great system reliability. Our maintenance costs go down. So all of that yields benefits for the riding public.
So when will all the original cars, when do you expect them all to be replaced?
I think we're just about there. Certainly all the trains in service are the newer trains. And we actually have a very healthy number of spare trains now that we didn't used to have at all because we were cannibalizing parts to keep the system running.
Are the ones in reserve right now the old trains, or are they new trains that are in reserve?
Pretty much all new trains. Now, what we started during COVID is now a 5-year plan, basically, of improving the rail infrastructure itself on the Metrorail. So we've been replacing track that's worn. Now there's signals, electronic systems, switches, etc., that we're all replacing. So like I said, this is a 5-year capital initiative. And because of COVID, we reduced the hours, we reduced the frequency, and that gave us more flexibility to accelerate this rehab work. So we're going to continue refurbishing that. And there's actually something very similar planned for the Metromover. We're at the tail end of a procurement that will replace all the electronics, the computer systems, and everything on the Metromover that, again, is also original from 1984. So you'll see that the Metromover has different system outages, and a lot of that is just old cabling that's worn or fraying, or old computer systems that look like your Atari from 1984. So the Metromover will be going through that process. That's also going to be a 5-year process to retool the Metromover.
So the Metrorail line was extended. Was that started before you came in office and finished up while you're in office? Or I know it was extended to the airport and down 112 and how did that come about?
I'm not in office, but
I'm sorry, not in office. You're right. I'm sorry.
Right.
When you were director.
Yes. The extension of the Metrorail, there was an extension, I think, in the 2000s out to the Palmetto station. And then before I started here, we already had the extension to the airport, to the MIC, the Miami Intermodal Center, which is right next to the rental car facility.
Sometimes life moves so fast, you try to place when things were done, and sometimes you're correct and sometimes you're not.
And that's something very important with regard to everything, is the need for marketing. We've done a lot of partnering with people to try to get the word out. A lot of people have said to me over the years, it'd be great if you extended the Metrorail to the airport. Well, guess what? It's there. It's been there for a number of years, and it could be better utilized. So we want people to know that we have garages where you could leave your cars parked at a Metrorail station for an extended period of time because you're traveling to the airport, take your flight, go on your trip, come back, and your car will still be there at the Metrorail garage.
That's great because parking at the airport garage is horrendous. Tell us about the SMART plan.
So,
well, you want to tell them what the acronym stands for?
So the Strategic Miami Area Rapid Transit Plan, the SMART plan, is very important. You know, the Metrorail, like I said, opened in 1984. And I think the county's population has at least doubled since then. And certainly we've grown in every direction out from what the Metrorail covered. So it was important to come up with a plan that would extend rapid transit systems to all these growth areas. And by rapid transit, it could be a number of different modes. It could be a Metrorail, it could be a light rail, it could be a streetcar, it could be a bus rapid transit. And basically for each one of these 6 SMART plan corridors, what we wanted to do was conduct an engineering study to pick the most appropriate mode for that corridor. So which are the corridors? So first of all, why is there a SMART plan? So for a long time, we had different projects that were going on. There was a Bay Link, there was a North Corridor, there's an East-West, and it almost seemed like the projects were kind of jockeying for a position. And I have to credit our TPO director, Eileen Bouclé. She kind of studied what other cities across the country were doing, and she saw that they had these comprehensive plans with a funding pro forma. And so we have a SMART plan, 40-year funding pro forma, and that shows how you can afford to do all the projects. And so one project shouldn't have to jockey for a position with another project for fear that there won't be enough funding. They're all shown in this funding pro forma, and that way all the projects can move together in parallel as quickly as possible. So of course, the first of those corridors was the South Corridor. The mode that was selected there by the TPO, Transportation Planning Organization, was the BRT. And that project moved in record time, and we applied for federal funding. And in less than 2 years, the federal funding was awarded to us, which is record time for the federal process. We received a Small Starts grant for $100 million. And that's the first time Dade County has received one of those corridor grants in over 20 years. We also received $100 million from the Florida Department of Transportation. We've put in $100 million of county funds. And so this $300 million project is going to provide rapid transit. We're going to provide safe, convenient stations, the same stations you would have for a rail project. In fact, this project is being planned with convertibility in mind. So we have 14 stations between Dadeland and Florida City.
Sorry, explain convertibility.
Convertibility. So this project, as I mentioned, we're going to have electric buses that run up in the corridor that are totally quiet. And so in the future, we're assuming there's going to be population growth and density growth, and we'll get to a point where you can have the cost basis for converting the system from bus rapid transit to rail. So these 14 stations that we're building
on grade rail.
On grade rail. So these 14 BRT stations, the day we convert to rail, you would just make them longer, and you would modify the platform inside the station. But the station's completely enclosed from the elements. There's even an air-conditioned vestibule. There's fare prepayment. So you, just like a train station, pay to get into the station. You wait in a center platform. And that way, when the vehicle pulls up, all the doors open and everybody can board the electric bus simultaneously. You don't have to wait for people to tap or only go through a front door. It works just like a train. In fact, at all the intersections along the South Corridor, there'll be gate arms that come down. The vehicle, the electric bus, will communicate with the signal. So if the light turns green, gate arms will come down. So this vehicle won't have to stop except for these 14 stations. And so the time travel is the same time as a train. So at the end of the day, you're going to get all the benefits of a train, but at a fraction of the cost, about 1/4 or 1/5. And that's why we're able to implement this project right away. We hopefully will be moving forward with the project and starting the construction this year.
So I got 2 questions, and let me ask you before I forget them. Number one is, how will that integrate with the train system? I mean, how will the bus stop, or how will it integrate? And number 2, will there be a hiccup at all with your departure in having this project move forward?
There shouldn't be any hiccups. We have a procurement that's already finished and a contract that has been approved by the county commission for basically engineering and contractual team that was formed, a joint venture to design and construct the project. The buses are being procured, so pretty much everything's underway. Now, there is an interface at the Dayland South Metro Rail station. So there's separate improvements planned for that Metro Rail station, improved elevators and escalators, improved canopies for shade, etc. So that station is going to look and feel totally different. We want the experience to match the experience of the new service.
Well, so the buses won't necessarily go up to kind of like, like with the trains, you'll still have to walk and take the elevators.
But it'll be much a smoother process. Or and you'll have information as to the trains above, so it'll all be very convenient, much more convenient than it is today.
Is the south is what I understand the first?
Correct.
In the spider web, or not the spider web, the spider legs, right. Actually.
Right.
You want to call it?
So that project, like I said, our first successful FTA funding request in over 20 years. The next project is called the Beach Corridor, and that connects basically downtown Miami with South Beach along MacArthur Causeway. So there we finished our study, and the TPO basically selected the recommendation of an elevated rubber tire system. An elevated rubber tire could be either a people mover or a monorail. 2 years ago, we received an unsolicited proposal. A request for proposals was issued, and as part of that procurement process, a monorail project was selected. So in the fall, the county commission approved basically an interim agreement where this concession team is doing preliminary engineering analysis so that the final price of the project can be set. And then a final agreement would be approved by the county commission.
Let me go back to the south for a second. What is the cost to convert, and what is the ridership needed to be able to convert? And is there anything in written that it will be converted once it reaches X amount of riders per day? I mean, how is that going to be scheduled?
So when the Bus Rapid Transit was originally selected, there was a threshold set. But very recently, that threshold was removed by the TPO back in December. So, what's interesting is the two different federal processes. There's the small starts for projects that are $300 million or less. That's what we won. And then projects that cost more than $300 million, then you go through the new starts process with the Federal Transit Administration. So that new starts process takes longer, has more steps, has a lot more cities applying for those funds. A lot more requests than the funding they actually have. And a lot of people that go through that process and are successful, it takes them 8 to 10 years to. And part of that good rating is demonstrating that you have sufficient ridership to offset the cost of the project. When we were doing our study, the Bus Rapid Transit was estimated at $300 million, and the rail would have been estimated at $1.4 billion.
What's the difference again? I'm sorry.
$300 million for Bus Rapid Transit versus $1.4 billion for rail.
So is that rail at grade, or is that rail?
That was at grade for
grade.
The 20 miles between Dayland and Florida City. And that's an all-in project cost. And construction, designing it, administration, the studies and the evaluations the Federal Transit Administration makes you do.
And a time frame to build it out would be a lot longer.
Right. If you're awarded the funding.
If you're awarded the funds.
Right. And for these projects, you pursue, like I said, shares of funding. So let's say for that $1.4 billion project, you were pursuing 50% of it from the federal government, $700 million. Then you'd be pursuing another $350 million from the state. You don't necessarily.
You might get it or you might not.
Right. You might get a good rating on your project, but the state.
Meanwhile, everybody's suffering, stuck in traffic.
Right. So this project is a step towards rail because you're getting the stations, you're getting all those amenities at the stations, the signs that tell you when the next vehicles are coming. You have the climate control.
And if it rains, you got cover.
Right. You have the gate arms. You have the time savings. That's the most important thing. People want to save time. You're going to be on these electric buses. So now the neighbors along the corridor aren't going to complain about steel wheels grinding on tracks, the complaints we get along the Metro Rail. So this project provides a lot of benefit. And when you have bus rapid transit, you have a lot of flexibility. You can layer multiple express bus services because the vehicles can pass each other at a station. You don't necessarily get that with rail.
Rail. Okay.
So we
go
had the
ahead.
beach corridor
Okay.
also reached a major milestone.
Mhm.
We finished the procurement and we entered into that interim agreement. The North Corridor. So the North Corridor runs up North 27th Avenue from the Martin Luther King Station around 54th Street up to the Hard Rock Stadium, the county line. There, the TPO selected an elevated alternative, and we've issued a request for proposals for teams to design, build, finance, operate, and maintain that project. So again, getting through the study phase, getting the TPO to pick an alternative, and starting the procurement, those are major milestones.
But elevated could be a life away by the time it's put into service.
Well, once we go through this procurement, then it's an open-ended procurement. Yeah. So it's all different kinds of technology. So it could be a Metromover, it could be a monorail, it could be a Metro Rail. And once we select someone, then basically we're agreeing to embark on the federal process together to go get those federal funds. So yes, that's going to be a multi-year process. Now we have other corridors. For example, the East-West corridor. That runs along State Road 836, out past the Turnpike, out to 147th Avenue. So back when the half-cent sales tax was passed, that corridor had already been designated as Metro Rail, but just in October, the TPO selected Bus Rapid Transit unanimously as the alternative for the East-West corridor. So we have the South corridor, that's Bus Rapid Transit. We have the East-West corridor, that's Bus Rapid Transit. And there's one more corridor coming to the TPO, the last one, the Kendall corridor that FDOT is managing. And they're also going to be recommending Bus Rapid Transit. So 3 of the corridors are Bus Rapid Transit.
So how will they do that? How will they do that with Kendall? Will they take over some lanes of drive lanes?
They're recommending that the outside lanes, like they haven't made that recommendation yet. They're finishing their analysis, but one of the alternatives is for the outside lanes basically to be painted red and to be designated for buses or business access. You have lots of businesses, driveways, et cetera, along the corridor. So those would be the only non-buses that could use those lanes.
So somebody sent, there's a whole bunch of people actually writing and asking questions. What happened to the half-cent sales tax voted on the people of Miami-Dade County about 10 years ago? Where did it go? Did it go? And I've always heard that some of it, because we were having an economic decline, some of it went to maintaining the equipment, and then some of it went to new. Explain it. Let's try to put fact to fiction.
So this is the facts as best I know them.
Yeah.
So in 2002, the People's Transportation Plan passed. That plan talked about these corridors we're talking about. And that plan said for the North Corridor and for the East-West Corridor, studies had already been done recommending Metro Rail extensions. And for these other corridors, you had to do a study to find the appropriate mode. So it was undecided what the beach, the South, there was one more, the Northeast Corridor. So the Northeast Corridor runs from downtown to Aventura on the existing FEC railroad tracks. So it's basically to build additional stations along those tracks between Miami and Aventura and run a commuter rail service on there. So that one has to be rail because it's already a railroad. So the People's Transportation Plan had a lot of things. It said that these other corridors you should do a study to pick the mode. The East-West Corridor, they said Metro Rail, but now we've changed that, and in October we picked Bus Rapid Transit for the East-West Corridor. The People's Transportation Plan talked about purchasing new vehicles. It talked about roadway improvements, new roads, widening roads, intersection improvements in neighborhoods. There were all kinds of things that were approved in that People's Transportation Plan. And for these big corridors, it was known that the half penny was not enough, that you would need federal and state funding. And the only way to get federal and state funding is to do these studies and to go through their process. That's been clear for decades. You have to follow the Federal Transit Administration process if you want federal funding for your project. So in 2007, 2008, the economy, as everybody knows, was bad. Global financial meltdown. A lot of people, the price of fuel went through the roof, and people simply here couldn't afford to have a car. Bus ridership went through the roof during those years. And yes, there were some of this halfpenny. There was something called unification, where halfpenny went into operations to get through that period. And over the years, that's been undone.
So it's not happening anymore.
Not happening anymore.
When Alex Pinellas was mayor, we all were told that we'd have all this transportation improvements, and somehow it just seemed like that half cent wasn't used where it was supposed to be used. And then it seems like since you've been on board the last 5.5 years, you have started using that for what the intended purpose was. I think there was collected $2.7 billion
Right.
or over the last 18 years.
I think that movement started before I got to the county. Once the economy improved, and I really like to think that when the Brightline service was announced, that got people here really focused on transportation. And I think that's when that. So I wasn't here yet, and the county commission started this strong focus on redirecting the halfpenny so it wasn't in operations and bringing it back to capital. And so that was a constant drumbeat.
Do you know how
before
long
I started here?
Do you know how long it was used for operations rather than the intended purpose?
Well, in terms in the halfpenny language, it said you could use a halfpenny for the operations of things that were approved for the halfpenny. So, for example, one of the things that were promised in the halfpenny is the People's Transportation Plan was that you wouldn't have a fare for the Metro Mover. So, therefore, the operations of the Metro Mover is an acceptable expense of the halfpenny. So, you have operational things that are eligible.
I'll say this, and you don't have to answer. A lot of people who lived here that voted for it, and I don't know if you lived here and you voted for it or you didn't vote for it.
I was born here.
You were born here, okay. So, we all thought that, we all knew that Miami-Dade County was going to be this upcoming city, and everybody who's ever lived here knew that we do development before we do infrastructure. So I think we all thought, let's start with the infrastructure. Let's plan ahead because we know what's coming. And it just seemed to lag. And it still, to some extent, seems to lag, that development is all over the place and we still don't have the infrastructure to get from A to B to C. I mean, I'm hoping we catch up, but you never know in Miami.
Well, if there hadn't been a global financial meltdown and other things hadn't happened along the way, maybe our story would be different now. But I'll say we're very, very fortunate that we have a Metro Rail system. That Metro Rail system was done with an 80% grant from the federal government, a 10% grant from the state government. And so Dade County paid for 10% of the Metro Rail. We pay all of the operations and maintenance because that's the gift that it keeps on giving.
Right. Now that you have new cars.
Right. But you still electricity, personnel, etc. But we were fortunate we got that Metro Rail system when we were a very young city. And now developers really understand the value of building around transit. So like everything, maybe traffic wasn't that bad then, where this conversation had not reached this level of importance. So we were fortunate we passed the halfpenny. We'd been over without that halfpenny. And cities across the country are passing these types of initiatives on a regular basis because everybody is facing the same issues that we're facing. Every city has grown across the country and is facing these congestion issues.
So right now, I think there's 50,000 Miami-Dade residents that use the public transportation. Is that accurate?
Our boardings on the Metro Rail are pre-COVID. We were in a 60,000 range. Boardings on buses was in a 180,000 range. And boardings is how many times somebody gets on a bus or a train. So obviously you could get on a train and a bus on a given day. So it's hard to say exactly the specific number of passengers.
So, and I think 1.3 million people drive to work in a car. Some statistic that I read. Okay. So how do you increase the amount of people that take public transportation rather than sit in their car? What do you need to do to get them to switch and put down the keys?
So I think the first thing, like we talked about, is marketing awareness. People need to know that we have a great transit system, that the Metro Rail runs to the airport, that we have amazing apps that can plan your whole trip for you. It's called Go Miami-Dade. That app includes security alert systems. It includes Apple Pay. If you have a credit card that's contactless payment, you can tap and use the fare. So we created, and through our app, a customer reward system, again, to help promote what we have. And besides that, like I said, people want clean, safe, reliable, and they want to save time. I think that's the number one incentive for someone to leave their car at home. I mean, we have to acknowledge there's a convenience to having a car, right? You can take things with you. You can do multiple trips. You don't have to wait. But if you have a regular commute, we want you to see transit as a real reliable option. So that's what our goal is, for Dade County to be a car optional community. You don't have to have a car to get around. So something else we're doing is working on a bus network redesign. So we've partnered with the Transit Alliance. We've hired a consultant that has done these kinds of redesigns across the country. And basically, we're going to retool the bus routes to hopefully make them more convenient, increase the frequency. If there's a bus every 5 or 10 minutes, well, then you don't really have to worry about your transfer. And it's going to be easier to get to where you're going. So hopefully that system or that network redesign is implemented by the end of this year. And you see a lot more people using transit.
Speaking of redesign, stoplights, they're supposed to all be programmed dependent upon the traffic. Where are we in that endeavor on, say, US 1?
Well, so several things happened. We started an initiative to basically retime all the signals on the major corridors. And that's an iterative process done with traffic engineers and analysis, and you run models and software and you change that signal timing. But then we did a pilot project for something called smart signals. So the smart signal, instead of being on a pre-timed clock, it actually has sensors and detectors, and it can tell if cars are backing up more in one direction than the other. And the computer itself starts changing the signal timing to make that intersection as efficient as possible. And then there's communication down the corridor so that you can hit more green lights and you have better continuity and traffic flow. So of those 300 pilot intersections, US 1 was one of them. And we've seen a great time savings, I think up to 15 minutes during the peak hour. We also use that same technology on the South Dade Transitway. Right now, the buses are communicating with the signals and getting transit signal priority. So sometimes they get the green sooner, or sometimes the red ends sooner, so that the bus gets through. And with that alone, the buses on the South Dade Transitway got a 25% time savings.
Really?
Yes. So then,
do you know what the cars have achieved?
Well, on US 1, it's like a 15-minute time savings. And then we did a few other corridors. So now we did a massive procurement with about $160 million. So we can install this smart signal technology across all the signals in the county. Our department is responsible for close to 3,000 signals.
So when do you think that will be completed?
That's going to be about a 4-year process. We're just got this contract awarded late last year. And so we're going to tackle the most congested areas first.
So US 1, where does that start and where does that stop? I know that's kind of weird. It would really matter if you're going north or south, but where does that signalization start as far as improvement, and where does it start? I mean, what range is it? And when you say 15 minutes, it saves you 15 minutes, or saves the average driver 15 minutes. How far is that drive for 15 minutes? Is it a 20-minute drive? I mean, a 20-mile drive?
I think if I recall correctly, the 15-minute savings was from, I think, 152nd Street to downtown.
Oh, yeah, that's still, that's probably about 11 miles.
Right. So 15 minutes each way.
Yeah.
That's half an hour
Yeah,
a
that's half an
day.
So
That's
have they
adds
stopped?
up.
Is it farther down than? Is it farther down south than 152nd, or is
Well,
it 157?
so
Second.
this was
Yeah.
our initial pilot for 300 signals. So
Mhm.
now we're going to deploy this everywhere. And it's the same technology that we're going to have that full transit signal preemption
Mhm.
for the electric buses on the BRT.
So it hasn't really the technology hasn't been implemented any place farther south than 157.
I'd have to double check.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't mean to push you.
It's been a few
I know
years.
I know there's a bunch of information out there, and I'm probably asking you too much. So tell us what. So I've gotten a bunch of little notes from people. Some people actually that have asked me to ask you questions, and one of them is, what's been your biggest accomplishment that you feel?
Well, I think if I had to say it in a word,
I'm throwing you a softball here.
If I had to say it in a word, it's technology.
Mhm.
5.5 years ago, we had two different departments. They weren't necessarily working together, and there was synergy in bringing them together and resources they could share. So, like the synchronization of the traffic signals, there were people doing calculations by hand. We modernized the traffic management center. We've put up cameras at intersections. Now we have these computer feeds with all this information, and we have engineers at workstations, and they're now cooperating with the center that the Florida Department of Transportation has. So we're using software, et cetera, to make things better. Even on the transit system, all these new buses and trains now have new modems. Our app, we completely modernized our app. So now you have real-time information as to when your vehicle is coming. The parking at the stations, at the metro stations, we changed that to pay by phone. So just the word technology, we've partnered with Waze there to put information out there for people driving, where there's construction projects that we're doing or delays. We partnered with them on their commuter service, carpooling. So they know where everybody's driving, so it's easier for them to match people up for carpooling. So we contributed to that. It takes a long time to build a new transit system or widen a road. But with technology like the smart signals and all these things I'm talking about, you kind of get virtual capacity in a very short time. So our focus was that anything and everything technological that was available out there to improve mobility in Miami-Dade County, we wanted to find it, we wanted to implement it, and we're on this track forever. This course of a mobility management agency, this is a framework that has been implemented and will
and completely
continue
supported
moving
by
forward.
the commission.
Absolutely. The commission, Mayor Levine Cava, everybody is focused on improving transportation here. So any resource or tool that's out there that is available to us, we've implemented it and we'll continue doing that into the future. So Miami-Dade County has been nationally recognized for being a leader, a trendsetter in terms of advancing all these technologies. We've also put a strong focus on pedestrian, bicycle amenities. We're the only county that's or the first county that became a member of something called NACTO, which is the National Association of Cities focused on pedestrian and urban issues. We've created new guidelines. We've adopted a Vision Zero philosophy, which means we want to eliminate all car crashes or incidents or injuries associated with bicycle pedestrian use of our transportation system. So I think there were a lot of things that we're
a lot of work done in 5.5
we're
years.
as forerunners now. And I have to say, even with the Federal Transit Administration, at one point, Dade County had issues with the FTA in terms of reimbursement of funds, and there were higher levels of scrutiny being applied to Dade County because of those past issues. That's all been cleaned up. The FTA has seen how we've followed the process for these corridors on the SMART plan, and they're taking us very seriously now with regard to our efforts to implement these projects. They see that we're not just running up to Washington and asking for $1 billion. We're following their process, and they're rewarding us for that.
Okay, here's a pie in the sky question. Thank you, Ed Silva. He asked, if you had the money, what mode of transportation would you pick for each corridor? If you had an unlimited amount of money. This is my friend Ed.
If we had unlimited amounts of money, um, I think the smartest way to have great transportation is to have great land use. So as you mentioned, a lot of growth occurred here before the land use occurred, or before the infrastructure was implemented. So um, say you live here, and let's say there's a rapid transit corridor there, but that's 3/4 of a mile away. Are you going to walk there? No,
Not
it's
in
too
rain,
hot.
in the
You're like, all
sun,
right,
yeah.
etc. So saying that you have this mode or the other mode is not the end all solution that fixes everything. What's important is that connectivity.
Mhm.
So we're seeing the land use changing around the transit systems. Finally, we're getting development and density around the metro rail stations. So we've piloted a new project, and it's called Connect Miami-Dade, Go Miami-Dade. We have something called Go Nightly. And so these are pilot projects where basically we have flexible route circulators. So the idea is, instead of you walking or getting yourself to this trolley or bus route that goes back and forth, we have flexible route vehicles that maybe don't pick you up at your house, but maybe pick you up a block or two away, along with some of your other neighbors. And then that takes you to the major transit corridor. So once you're on that transit corridor and you're in a dedicated right of way, whether it's BRT or rail, you're getting that same time savings. That's the transit network of the future. That's how you get people out of the cars. It's what everybody
But
talks
it's
about. The first mile, last mile issue. That is the paramount issue to getting people to use transit.
Yeah, it's also the transfer time, right? So when I asked you how you connect, the metro rail to the buses,
right?
Okay,
it's about frequency of the service.
Yeah, I mean,
right.
how long does it take for you to get out of a bus and walk up the stairs or go on an escalator and get into, and then you got to wait for a train?
But if each of those vehicles are coming in and out every 5 minutes, then it doesn't matter, because you do that at Washington, D.C. If any train station in Washington, you have to go from this level to that level to transfer the other line. You do that in New York City. You do that in Paris. You do that in London. Anywhere where there's a robust transit system, you have to go up or down one level to get from one line to the other.
So COVID is going to eventually end. Knock on wood, as my mom would say. What do you expect the increased traffic? We're going to go back to the traffic. I mean, I live in Palmetto Bay and I drive to Coconut Grove, and it was an hour drive every day. I think it's 17 miles. Today, it takes me a half an hour. What are we doing specifically to make sure that in September, I know you have a time limit, so you can watch the clock. September of 2021, when hopefully COVID's gone, the majority of people are going back to their offices.
Well, I think in to that end, the world has changed. And I'll tell you, being in transportation right out of college, people were always talking about, how do we get people to carpool? Mm-hmm. How do we get people to telecommute? And now telecommute is called Zoom or Teams or any one of these apps we're all using, because it's about efficiency and the best use of people's time. So I think for a long time, employers resisted telecommuting because, how do you really gauge the productivity of your workers? And from everybody I hear, wow, my business, my workers, my staff, we're more productive now than before. We're getting more work done than before by being virtual.
Well, people aren't stuck in a car for 2 hours a day.
Right.
I mean, that could be it.
Right. And so I hope that is something good that comes out of COVID-19, that people will embrace working virtually, because that goes a long way to reducing congestion and improving our mobility. And let's keep something in mind. And on the roads, we're also moving goods. Mm-hmm. So the more people that either work virtually or use transit, we reduce the congestion on the roads, and now we can move our goods around, which helps our economy.
Okay, so there's a couple other questions, and I don't want to finish it up because I know you have to go, about some questions about Palmetto Bay, which I know you'll love. Alice, in your tender, what is it's up there. What's your favorite accomplishment? Oh, I already asked her that. Thank you. Okay, Bob Bazzelli. Hi, Bob. Why no flyovers in South Dade like in the Aventura area?
Well, I presume we're talking about flyovers for US 1. And US 1 is a state road. So there's a process for planning those things. But if you've seen the flyover in Aventura, it has concrete retaining walls on either side of it. Starts looking a lot like a highway. Yeah. And, that now becomes a community impact issue. I know that maybe 10 years ago, the Florida Department of Transportation was looking into flyovers, I think along 8th Street, and they were shot down by the public. No, keep our arterial the way it is. We don't want elevator bridges.
Here's a long one from Bill Cassell. In your professional opinion, were there any drawbacks to residents by completing the long recommended bridge on 87th Avenue in Palmetto Bay? The time, money, savings, and safety enhancements were massive. This appeared to be a political-driven decision and not a decision based on a proven scientific method or decades of professional recommendations by numerous organizations. The chief complaint was that the traffic congestion would simply move a few blocks north of the bridge. Please take a moment to discuss how this was proven false many times by comprehensive modeling. In other words, we're talking about the bridges. The bridges never. The bridge situation.
The famous bridge.
And the bridge situation in Palmetto Bay never leaves.
All right. Well, I'll say this: with any transportation project, you go through a process. There's the technical need, there's the engineering, and then you evaluate the impacts. Right. In some places, we've talked about new highways or rail project or things, and they got shot down because of the community concerns surrounding that project. So that's why studies are done. That's why information is taken to the Transportation Planning Organization. And basically it's those members at the TPO that have to weigh, the benefits with the impacts and reach those policy decisions. They're representing the entire county. And so they have to weigh those county-wide concerns.
Listen, everybody knows, and I'll put this on the table, I was always against a one bridge, but I was for the 4 bridges. And I never understood why it was not looked at a little bit more carefully, not just putting one bridge on 87th, but completing 77th Avenue. There's 2 bridges could be there, and I think there was another location for another bridge. Why that's never been looked at more thoroughly, since people from Cutler Bay who are stuck in their cars and people from District 3 in Palmetto Bay who are stuck in their cars cannot get north during the morning or get home. And I mentioned numerous times, I watched somebody sit in their car, couldn't even back out for half an hour because of the amount of traffic.
Well, hopefully we'll get a lot of those people riding the South Corridor BRT, and we'll see some improvement in that area.
Do you think there's any possible way that Dade County will look at putting in 3 or 4 bridges in Palmetto Bay in the future?
Again, we have a transportation planning organization, and that's where these things are vetted and they're put into the pipeline, and then that's where the process begins.
How about we were talking about circles on Old Cutler, and I know
those are moving forward.
Those are moving forward. You want to explain where those are going to be and what kind of time enhancement?
Well, right now we're going through basically the property acquisition process, because at each one of these circles, there's some impacts on the corners. So as soon as we get through that, we want to finish off the design and put them out to bid. So I guess you could see those done probably in a couple of years.
A couple of years. I got a couple other questions. Sorry. Okay. Were the circulars and freebies always intended on the busway? I guess those are the freebies that, run out of Pinecrest, Palmetto Bay, and I'm sure Cutler Bay.
Well, once we have a full bus rapid transit system, we expect those modes to connect to the busway, but not be on the busway. So the way the stations are being laid out, we want people basically to be dropped off at our major hubs.
Yeah, right now the freebies, I take you from a couple of spots in Palmetto Bay to Daylam Station and drop you off. So it's, the last mile
Right.
type. I think
We need feeders. You
Yeah.
need feeders into the system.
you probably need more feeders, I would assume.
Everything helps.
Everything else.
Again, if it's convenient for you to get to the system, then you can benefit from it.
Another question, and then we'll wrap this up. Somebody asked what the standards are used for the different studies, the traffic studies that you use to determine, signalization, improvements in roadways. Is there a one standard study?
Well, we follow different engineering manuals and guidelines that we have to use. The one that we end up talking about the most is called the MUTCD, Manual Uniform Traffic Control Devices. This is what decides whether you
Very
could
technical.
could put up a stop sign or not. Then there are established traffic engineering manuals that we follow that basically talk about how you estimate the traffic, how you analyze it. You look at the peak hour, you look at 24-hour volumes. So there are different established ways to do these studies that we do the same thing that, say, the Florida Department of Transportation does.
Is it basically the same study that's used in every major city in Florida?
Yes.
Yeah. So and that's what you're required to use, right?
Correct. And at the end of the day, you want to see if something's going to have a benefit. You want to make sure you don't have unintended consequences, et cetera, and you value all those things together.
Okay. I want to follow up again and say thank you very much for coming out here. If you want to say anything to anybody out there, we appreciate your hard work and dedication the last 5.5 years, and I definitely appreciate you coming here to today to talk to us.
Well, thank you very much. And like I said, I was born in Miami. I plan to live here the rest of my life, and contributing however I can to help improve mobility and quality of life here. Okay. So it's been a great pleasure.
Thank you. And thank you for everybody who's watching. And next week, Ed Silva will be on the program on Thursday, and we'll be talking about all things Palmetto Bay.